At number 10 we have I flew in from Torrid. Going to another universe sounds good, but you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's going to be really simple. Maybe it's a universe where everything is the same but everyone's left-handed. Or maybe it's a reality where the Nazis won the war and O.J. Simpson leads a fighting force in America against the Nazi forces. Well, the man from Torrid probably wished he stayed back in his universe. It was 1954 and a plane just landed in Tokyo. Everyone was getting off and everything seemed normal. But then one dude halted everything. Custom officials ran out and started investigating this one guy. He had all his documents, but he was from a country that didn't exist. It was a place called Torrid. The man in question said that it was a very real place and that he had flown from Torrid to Japan many times. At first glance this guy seemed to be a whack job, but then the crazy thing was that all his paperwork was legitimate. He had official stamps on his passport to back all of his stories and claimed that the country of Torrid was squeezed right in between France and Spain. The custom officials in Japan were stumped, and I understand why. There isn't anything in the training manual about how to deal with interdimensional travel. So they escorted him to a hotel and he was not allowed to leave until the problem was sorted out. 2 guards stood outside of his door and he was on the 15th floor, so there was no way for him to sneak out of the building. In the morning the guards went in to take him out for more questioning and the dude was gone. He disappeared like a fart in the wind, and that was the end of the story. I guess he didn't like how strict we were in our dimension. At number 9 we have the Beatles ain't dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed and there was a man named Jonas sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonas started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8 we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they've succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7 we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. Never mess with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6 we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5 we have Interdimensional Cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4 we have, what road is this? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alaca de Guadarira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alaca de Guadarira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3 we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out in what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2 we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light, but because of this bending of light there is a chance that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension.
Starting us off at number 10 is Emily Sagui. I want to say Sagui, people around the office are like Sagui, I'm not really sure. And I feel like this woman was the final boss of doppelgangers, and you guys are about to agree with me. So Emily was a normal school teacher, very good at her job, except for the fact that she had 19 different jobs within 16 years. In 1845, the school she was working at finally found out why that was. Emily's doppelganger was seen everywhere. Once, while teaching a class, 13 students witnessed her doppelganger right next to her, mirroring all her movements. It then sat beside her while she ate, while she had no idea it was even there, despite everyone being able to see it. In another instance, she went out of the class to pick some flowers in the garden right outside, and 42 girls in her class saw her doppelganger sitting at her desk, while Emily was outside. They could see her outside the window and in the classroom. Some even tried approaching the doppelganger and found they could pass right through it, but that it felt like a thick fabric. Even though she never saw it, she would always become powerless and groggy whenever it manifested. Coming in at number 9, we have the parents. I swear down, if I saw doppelgangers of my parents, I would legit shit myself and continue shitting myself for at least 3 days. So this story was shared by Reddit user O'Carth, who said one morning they woke up in bed and their dad came into their room and told them to wake up before going down to the kitchen. At that point, the user was like, okay, maybe I should wake up, but not entirely. So they started watching YouTube videos in bed, as I'm sure most of you are probably doing as we speak. 10 minutes later, the user's mum is going to the kitchen and does and says the exact same thing as her dad, even though the user was very clearly awake. When they eventually got out of bed, they went to their parents' room to see their parents fast asleep in bed. Freaked out and confused, they woke them up to ask if both of them had told them to wake up as they were going to the kitchen, and both of them said no. So who the hell was walking into her room? That is my question. At number 8, we have the Ouija-induced doppelgangers part 1. This one comes from Redditor Celestial Spirit, who said when she was about 16, she was really into Ouija boards and playing around with them, but she had no idea that what she was doing was about to unleash some major doppelganger shit. One day, the user was sitting in the living room with her best friend when her mum walked in carrying the groceries. Except it was her mum, but a few years younger. Like exact same woman, exact same everything, just less wrinkles. They said hi to her, which the mum ignored, and watched as she went straight into her brother's room. 10 minutes later, thinking this was weird now, the user got a sick feeling and went upstairs to find her mum nowhere to be found. When she came back downstairs, her real mum was there walking through the door wearing completely different clothes. Feeling at number 7 slot are the Ouija-induced doppelgangers part 2. Now if seeing 2 of her mum wasn't bad enough, the next doppelganger victim was the user's brother. One night her mum was talking to him on the phone as he said he was on his way home. The minute they hung up, the brother walked through the door, talked to them for a while, and then went to the bathroom. 15 minutes later, he still hadn't come out of the bathroom, so the user was like, what the hell? I know he's not having a shit, so what exactly is he doing? She knocked and asked if he had fallen asleep and got no response. The next minute, her real brother walked into the room and everyone was freaked out because they had all just witnessed the brother already come in and go to the bathroom. The mum then slept with the brother in his room that night to make sure all was okay all throughout the night. The weirdest part was that both doppelgangers had darker eyes than the original people. Something demon-like going on. Now at number 6 is the mum. This one was shared by Reddit user Hyperham51197, who said she was talking to her dad in the hallway at home one night and both of them saw the mum walk past them into her room and close the door. They thought nothing of it and kept talking and eventually went to watch TV in the living room where they found the mum asleep on the sofa. The father-daughter duo looked at each other like he had just found out that he was not the father. Flabbergasted is the word. Completely flabbergasted. They both then went to the bedroom to see the door not just closed but locked. Neither of them went inside and the dad decided to sleep on the floor that night instead of venturing into that room. Good call, I would have done the same. Coming in at number 5 is the missionary conversation. This one was shared by Redditor I Am Not Harry Selden, who said he was walking home one afternoon when he saw 2 Mormon missionaries in the distance. One of the girls suddenly waves at him and calls him over by name, so he goes over there. They start talking and this girl clearly knows who he is acting like they're friends, all the while the guy has no idea who she is. He was desperately trying to figure out whether he had met her before and clearly she could tell, and reminded him that they had had a very long conversation on her friend's porch a few days ago. And he was like, maybe you met my brother, and she replied, I mean unless you guys are identical twins then I think not. And I mean siblings tend to look alike, but the user explained they definitely were not identical twins. They didn't even look that similar. So who the hell did she meet the first time? His doppelganger. At number 4 is the staring. This one comes from Reddit user Don, who said her sister saw her own doppelganger. Not the sister's doppelganger, but the user's doppelganger. One day her sister was just chilling on the computer and at around 12 PM the user came in, stared at the sister and what she was doing before leaving. But the user wasn't even home at that time. She was at school and didn't come back till 4 PM. When she did get home, the sister asked her why she'd been staring at her so weirdly earlier in the afternoon, to which she replied, I only just got home. Oh, that's not nice. Filling at number 3 slot is Sir Frederick Carney Raj. Now Frederick was a British Conservative politician who later went on to become an elected Member of Parliament for Essex South East back in 1886. In 1906, Frederick was sick in bed with the flu, so he couldn't come to a few debates that were going on, but apparently his doppelganger could. A fellow Parliament member, Sir Gilbert Parker, saw him sitting on the floor during the debates and went to tell him he hoped that he was feeling better. Parker got no response, and when he looked back at him, he literally vanished. Parker then went to tell Frederick about the situation, which he laughs off, saying he really wanted to be there, so maybe he subconsciously just sent his doppelganger there. However, it became less funny in the months afterwards when other Parliament members continued poking and prodding him to make sure he was there and real and not a ghost. Now at number 2 is the husband and dad. This one's from Redditor Shubbykins, who claims she's seen the doppelgangers of both her dad and her husband. Plot twist, not the same people. You nasty. Now one morning she was in the hallway when she saw her husband walking away from her towards the bedroom. She called out to him and he ignored her, so she followed him to the bedroom to find him nowhere to be found. Turns out he was upstairs the entire time. He hadn't even gone downstairs or into the bedroom. The case with her dad was that one day he was unloading things from his truck and told her he was going to bring them through the back door of the house. Now the user was in the kitchen that the back door led to and heard a noise at the door, and through the window she could see her dad bending down like he was about to tie his shoelace. She ran to the door to try and help him out, to see her dad nowhere to be found yet again. Take a shot for every time I've said that in this video. Instead, he was sitting inside his truck, which he couldn't have managed to reach in 2 seconds as it was way down the driveway. And finally, at number 1 is Vice Admiral George Tyron. Tyron was a British admiral that died in 1893 when his flagship, the HMS Victoria, collided into the HMS Camperdown near Lebanon. He was commanding 2 columns of the ship when he told them to turn toward each other, which was a rookie mistake. I'm not even an admiral and I know that. They rammed into each other, the one he was in sank like a brick, and he died knowing the death of 357 other men was also on his hands. Literally his last words was, "This is entirely my fault," and I find that hilarious. At the exact same time of his death, his wife was having a fancy party at their London home. Out of nowhere, the guests saw George dressed in his full uniform walking down the stairs right through the drawing room to the front door. Just as he was about to leave the house, he disappeared altogether in front of their eyes. Someone make it make sense, because I certainly don't know how to make it make sense.
Alright, coming in at number 10. So this is a combination story from a Redditor and me, because I had something really weird to add that happened to me, and it had a really strange ending. So, starting off, Spirity posted on Reddit in late 2018 saying, "I stopped at the gas station on my way to work one morning. I took out my debit card and I took my car keys with me, and I left everything else in the car. I prayed for my stuff as I threw my debit card in a metal cup I have in my car. Literally half a second later, I looked down and my card was gone. I pull apart everything trying to look for it and I simply couldn't find it. I go to work and go home and find it sitting on my desk. So weird. I double checked my bank account to make sure it was the card I used, and it was the card I used in the gas station. To this day I have still no idea what happened." Now this got nearly 3,000 upvotes, and they added an edit to this. They said, "Wow, this blew up overnight. To answer most questions that I saw, no, there was no carbon monoxide leaks. We have a monitor in our house, and that was the first thing I thought to check. I didn't pull up to a pump, just the normal parking in front of the QT, and was there for maybe 7 minutes in total. No conclusions in my life ever." So I wanted to continue on with this story because I had my own very weird credit card, debit card experience. So in April this year, I lost not 1 but 2 debit cards. Now I am chaos, you should absolutely know that about me. Every day is a battle against the chaos, and I really do try my best, I really do. Sometimes I do lose things though, and I lost my debit card for the first time in April. Honestly, I had no idea how it happened. I was probably just, going about my life. I was in the mall last I remember doing some shopping, and when I get home I was unpacking and I went through my purse and it just wasn't there. I went back to the mall, no one had seen it. Fine, chaos, like I said. I accepted this and I decided to go and get a new debit card and try harder. 1 week later I went to Banff. Now Banff is literally the most magical place I've ever been in my life, and I want to return really badly. I loved it. But I did lose my debit card there, which kind of sucked. I was on a trip and I couldn't get to a bank to fix it, and I had to borrow $20 off one of the trip organisers, so thank you, Michelle. I looked everywhere for it, trust me, like literally everywhere. I turned my hotel room inside out. I turned my purse and bags inside out. It was nowhere to be seen, and I concluded I must have lost it somewhere in the snow of Chateau Lake Louise. It was really annoying because I just had that $20 that I borrowed to last me for a 6-hour journey home, and that's that. The next day I went to the bank in Toronto and they recognized me from losing my card the week before. I was really embarrassed and ashamed of myself. I am a grown woman and I can't stop losing things. Nonetheless, they gave me a new card anyway and I unpacked all my stuff from Banff and I still never found it. Fast forward 3 months and I got my new card out of its usual place in my purse and I tried to pay for some stuff in a board game cafe. Yes, board game cafe. I'm a geek for life and I love it. So, come at me with Settlers of Catan and no, I won't trade for your sheep. Anyway, my card got declined and I was really confused because it'd just been payday, so I knew I had some cash. I took it to a cash point after that and it showed me my balance, but it wouldn't let me take anything out. I even called the bank, but they said there was nothing wrong with my card. Now, this went on for days until I looked through my purse and I saw, weirdly, another debit card. It turns out the card that I've been trying to use was the one that I'd lost in Banff 3 months before. Somehow, it was back. And I really can't explain it. Can you help? Honestly, so long as I never have to go back to the bank and tell them I've lost another card again in my life. It's all good. Coming into number 9, we have the double wife. This one came from the trusty Reddit glitch in the Matrix thread. White Zombie Cat shared their story, which got 3.4 thousand upvotes. They wrote, "Oh, I've got a story. One time my wife and I were coming back from a dinner night out. When I opened the door of the house, she was sitting at the computer working, as I usually find her when I get home. To me this was nothing unusual, except for the fact that she was entering the house with me. Weird. I shrugged it off, assumed I was tired, and I carried on. We went to bed and I told her that I saw her sitting at her computer, but she went deadly serious and told me that when I opened the door, she'd even seen herself sitting at the computer. That is alarming. Coming into number 8, we've got Elon Musk. Oh, Elon. I don't know if you guys know this, but Elon Musk thinks that we're living in a simulation, and so do a whole host of other scientists. If you guys haven't heard of Elon Musk, then you must research him. He's an important figure in our generation. He's ranked the 40th richest person in the world and within the top 25 most powerful, so he's a guy worth knowing about. He, amongst other scientific brains, have said that the universe behaves mathematically and is broken up into pieces, rather like pixels in a video game. Musk offered a simulation theory as an answer to why we haven't met aliens yet. He said, the absence of any noticeable life may be an argument in favour of us being in a simulation. Like when you're playing an adventure game and you can see the stars in the background but you can't ever get there. Well, I mean, does he have a point? Rumour has it that there are actually 2 tech billionaires currently engaging scientists to work on breaking us out of the simulation right now. So who's running this simulation? Some people think a post-human civilization are doing it. Basically, long story cut short, the theories say that computers have taken over and they're keeping us living in a simulation out of the way. The theory goes that the simulation isn't a perfect utopia. In order to keep us busy when there are problems right in front of us, we don't have time to wonder whether we're living in a simulation, except Elon is, so you failed, post-human civilization. Anyone still with me? Next up at number 7. In October 2011, the Daily Mail ran a story claiming that Amanda Knox had had her murder conviction appeal rejected. The article read that Knox had, and I quote, looked stunned this evening after she dramatically lost her prison appeal against her murder conviction. The report came from Nick Pisa, who is in Italy reporting on the case. Only she won the appeal, and the Mail was accused of fabricating an article to run had she lost, and they published it in error. The article made claims including this, and I quote, following the verdict, Knox and Sollecito were taken out of court, escorted by prison guards into a waiting van, which took her back to her cell in Capan and him in Perugia. Both will be put on a suicide watch for the next few days, as psychological assessments are made on each of them, but this is usual practice for long-term prisoners. But like, that never happened, so were the Daily Mail guilty of fabricating a story to publish, and had the judge's decision gone that way? Well, it seems there was an article on NewsThump that claimed that the Daily Mail actually insisted that they publish the correct article but had witnessed events in an alternate universe. It turns out that actually this was a joke, but maybe there's something to it. Coming into number 6, we have the missing hour. Do you ever wonder where time goes? I certainly do. Bear that in mind when we hear this story from Musical Moses, who posted it on Reddit. They shared this 5 years ago and had a whopping 4.7 thousand upvotes. They said, 10 years ago I was returning home from a road trip with 2 friends. I received a phone call from my parents asking when we would be arriving, and I explained that we were roughly 25 minutes away. About a minute later we came around a bend. It was a full moon and we could see the reflection from a lake below us. We also saw that the road was completely empty. Suddenly, everything went very, very dark in the car. No lights from the dash or gauges or headlights on the road. The music also stopped and then restarted at the beginning of the CD that we were listening to. There was now a vehicle pulled over by the police about a quarter of a mile in front of us that hadn't been there a split second before. I assumed that because I was tired, I dozed off for a second and it was late. I thought it was still quite peculiar though. After about a minute, the driver of the car turned the music all the way down and said, "Did that just happen to anyone else?" The other passenger in the back seat sat forward abruptly and exclaimed, "Oh my god, I thought I just fell asleep." We then realised that the clock in the car was reading an hour later than it had just a minute before. To keep ourselves from freaking out, we decided that the car had possibly had a momentary electrical failure and then reset the clock to an odd time, turned off the dash lights, headlights, gauges, etc. and restarted the CD. It was an explanation. When we arrived home 25 minutes later, we were actually 1 hour late. I'm missing an hour of my life to this day and I have no idea how it happened. So weird. This is another story from me coming in at number 5. We have the overpass. So I'm not sure if this is a ghost story or a glitch in the Matrix story, but there's an area in Toronto where I frequently walk and I've started to think that actually it might be a portal to another universe. Like, I'm not even kidding you. There's a rail path that runs to the west of the city and I walk up and down it a lot, and there's one point, always the same point at Bloor and Dundas. Every single time I walk up or down the stairs to the path, I swear to you that I see a figure, and sometimes multiple figures out of the corner of my eye walking by the stairs, only when I get there, there's literally no one there. And I'm not sure if it's like a mirage or like some kind of optical illusion that has something to do with the railings nearby, or it could literally be a colluding point of two universes. Universes? Who knows? Coming in at number 4, we have the Bernstein Bears. Now this is also known as the Mandela effect. The Bernstein Bears theory suggests that we're living in a parallel universe, which is pretty mind-bending. Basically, for those who read the Bernstein Bears books, some remember the title being spelled with an E, but others remember it being spelled with an A. The plot thickens as it turns out that some people vividly remember freedom fighter Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 90s, when in reality he died in 2013. Some people think that the popular TV show starring Sarah Jessica Parker was called Sex in the City, but in actuality it's Sex and the City. I could swear that Mr. Monopoly has a monocle, but it turns out he doesn't. Pikachu's tail doesn't have a black tip either, and well, Curious George never had a tail in the first place, and Darth Vader never said, "Luke, I'm your father." And also, it turns out that it's Looney Tunes and not Looney Tunes, and I have no idea when that happened. Are we living in a simulation? Is it a parallel universe thing? Like, what is happening? From mind bending to spoon bending at number 3. That's right, we have Uri Geller, the great spoon bender. Did you know that there are people out there that can bend cutlery using what can only be described as magic? So hands up if you guys have heard of Uri Geller. Uri is somewhat of an enigma. He can bend spoons and other utensils using the power of his mind. His career has spanned 4 decades and he has appeared on countless TV shows demonstrating his skills. So here is Uri quite recently manipulating a spoon.
Yes, it's beginning. You see, the spoon is becoming soft, like plasticine. And if I shake it, it's gonna go. There!
Here he is also bending an iPhone.
Bend. Bend. No, look! It's beginning. It's going. It's going. It's going.
Now, he isn't the only one who has this strange ability. It seems that James Randi bent this fork using the power of his mind, and I don't understand. All this has gone down in front of real people, and it sort of reminds me of this scene from The Matrix.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
Coming into number 2, we have a good old story about a cat. Meow. Shared on Reddit in 2018, Punk Terminator wrote, "When I was about 6 or 7, my cat died. It was the first time I experienced death and it really shook me up. Then, about a month later, I saw my cat walk into my room clear as day. I wasn't freaked out and I didn't question it. I reached down to pet him and suddenly he was gone. This happened a few more times until we got 2 new cats. Each time it happened, the fact he was dead never crossed my mind." I Pinch You 2039 responded with, "Cats are so damn stubborn they even refuse to leave after death." But my favourite comment was from Mikal Rue 0110 who wrote, "God opens the pearly gates. Well, in or out? Cats. I don't know whether they're coming or going, even in death." Right. wrap your head around this utter insanity at number 1. Get ready though, because this is actually pretty heavy. We have the double slit. Could all of these glitches in the matrix that we're experiencing be down to the behavior of electrons? Electrons are tricky little blighters. According to physicists, electrons can spin clockwise and anti-clockwise, but quantum mechanics says that they can spin both clockwise and anti-clockwise at the very same time, which is really confusing to us because that would mean that two things are happening at the same time, which is hard for us to get our heads around because there can only be one outcome and not two. Does that make sense? This creates a paradox as we've never seen two things spinning the same way at the same time. Electrons also show quantum indeterminism. Basically, to keep this super simple, if you fire an electron through a double slit, you would expect it to go through one slit or the other, choosing an outcome. However, scientists have observed electrons acting like waves, passing through both slits simultaneously, but then interfering with themselves. It's really complicated, but this could hint towards proving the theory that multiple outcomes create multiple universes and that actually they're unknowingly influencing each other. Some scientists even say that the act of being observed changes the way that electrons behaved, which actually is too mind-bending for my puny human mind. So would this mean that phenomena like the Mandela effect, where people remember different outcomes, are actually interactions with multiverses? Could this explain the Bernstein Bears? Can someone explain this to me, again, so I understand more? Ah, I've bent my own mind. Who needs Uri Geller? Maybe he's here somewhere. Okay, I'm freaking myself out, so that was that. Have you guys had any weird experiences? Do let me know in the comments section down below. I would absolutely love to hear them. I hope you enjoyed hearing my experiences. If I have any more, I'll certainly let you know. If you like these long form videos, again, do please let me know.